Exposition, which was a World's Fair, or International Exposition, that was held in Buffalo in 1901. It ran from May 1st through November 2nd, and most people remember it because William McKinley, president at the time, was shot and killed there. But there were 6 more months that happened around that one day, so I wanted to study what those 6 months were about. So on September 5th, William McKinley said, "Expositions are the timekeepers of progress. They record the world's advancement. They stimulate the energy, enterprise, and intellect of the people, and quicken human genius. They go into the home. They broaden and brighten the daily life of the people." So McKinley was shot the next day, like right after he said this. I said shot and killed, but he didn't actually die until 8 days later, so it's kind of not that dramatic. Well, it's dramatic, but it kind of got better, then got worse, and then got gangrene, and then died. So I don't talk about McKinley very much because it's exciting when someone dies, but it's not the only thing that happened at the fair. The Pan American was just one. You could say it was just one more exposition in a long line of international fairs, but it was really, really special to me, and I'll get into that. The first idea for it came in 1895, just as a celebration of by Pan American to mean the Western Hemisphere, so like North, South America. So in 1895, that just meant North and South America. But then the Spanish-American War happened, which was bad for the Philippines, but really great for my ass, because if the Spanish-American War didn't happen, the Pan-American would not be that exciting. So serious planning got underway in 1898 when the Spanish-American War was wrapping up. The Pan American Exposition Company was formed, which was a private corporation, in charge of raising funds for the fair and doing all the actual planning. The fact that this was a private corporation was a very important fact in understanding the fair, so that became my first theme, the theme of private business and funding for a fair. Along with that came modern ideas of advertising, especially towards women. Singer Sewing Machines was one of the biggest sponsors of the fair, and they had been a company for about 30 years. Their first factory was built in Scotland in 1876. So Singer was really big by 1901, and they had just a giant display that was very, very popular. And on September 5th, in his President's Day speech, McKinley also said that without competition, we should be clinging to the clumsy and antiquated processes of farming and manufacture and the methods of business of long ago, and the 20th would be no farther advanced than the 18th century. So business is really important to the fair. It really, from planning process to the funding process to the building process and to the actual fair, was really important. The second theme I came upon was how other countries were represented, especially Cuba and the Philippines, because the United States had just acquired these 2 territories, and they were not, well, Cuba was part of Pan America, but Philippines was it didn't really have a place in Pan America, so it was really important to me that the Philippines were included in this fair. There was about 20-acre Philippine village built on the grounds of the fair, and it was supposed to represent an authentic Philippine village. Filipino people came over to live on the fairgrounds for 6 months, and the fair organizers actually staffed American soldiers in the village because they thought it would be more authentic, because people expected American presence in Philippine, like even the smallest Philippine village. So this goes back to a lot of what the Spanish-American War was about, especially the debate between imperialists like William McKinley and anti-imperialists like Mark Twain and William Jennings Bryan. Sorry. If any of you are interested in learning more about this debate, Mark Twain wrote just dozens of articles and newspaper, journal articles, newspaper articles, books. He wrote poems, songs, just all about how terribly Americans treated the Philippines during the Spanish-American War. He actually wrote a really, I don't have the book with me, but he wrote a really interesting version of, what's the song that they sing in the South that is like, my eyes have seen the coming of the glory of the Lord? Yes, thank you. He wrote a really interesting version about Americans in the Philippines of that song. He did not like the Spanish-American War so much. The third theme I talked about was the advancement of technology and where technology was in 1901. And this was especially important for Buffalo. It was one of the reasons Buffalo was chosen to hold this Pan-American Exposition. Because Buffalo was known as the City of Light. They had had street lights in place since 1881. They were the first city in the United States to do so. And the crowning feature of the exposition, way at the top of that screen, that big tower there, was called the Electric Tower. And it was supposed to be a representation of really everything the fair was trying to accomplish. So, and what the message that the fair was trying to send. So, given the technological and social progress displayed at the exposition, it's really easy to forget that the United States had only been a country for 125 years at this point. So many changes were taking place at the same time and so quickly that Americans really needed a physical reminder of where the country was at the turn of the century. And that reminder was the Pan-American Exposition. Furthermore, as a young country relatively, the United States had decided that they should be a world power, but not really how they should be a world power yet. And so they spent the years leading up to 1901 kind of figuring out how to assert their dominance on a world stage that was pretty full already. So in 1901, they were still struggling with this decision between military, technological, and social dominance. And the Pan-American was really just a snapshot of that struggle. So I said I was going to talk about cutting stuff out, which, if you pick a good topic, I think the hardest part is going to be figuring out what to cut. I didn't do the Pan-American for my junior IS, but for some of you, you might spend up to 2 years studying this one topic, and there's so much out there, and you want to say absolutely everything there is. And I really did this with my topic because there's not very much historiography about the Pan-American. So I really wanted to do everything, and I could have written a book about it easily, but I can't do that right now. So, and it really took me a long time to figure all this out. I just finished cutting things this week. In my editing, I'm still cutting out some paragraphs here and there. But eventually, through all your work, it might take a long time, it might be the week before you turn it in, you'll get to your argument, and not the 10 pages of your introduction or even 1 page, but just one paragraph where you can write your argument, and everything you'll want to say in your 60, 70, 100 pages is going to support that paragraph somehow. And so everyone might have a different experience, but I had to be really, really harsh with mine. I started with around 140 pictures that I wanted to include, and I was told that that was not okay. So I ended up with I have about 30 or 35, which I'm not so happy with, but I guess if I had 3 pictures on a page, it would cost a lot of money to print. So again, you'll know you have a really good topic when it's not the writing that's hard, but the cutting out, because it wasn't hard to write my IS, I'm going to be honest. I had a lot of fun writing it. It wasn't difficult to come up with ideas, but I got really sad when I had to cut stuff out. So I wanted to make a little slideshow of everything of my favorite things that I had to cut out of my IS. So I also went a little crazy getting souvenirs, because souvenirs were a big thing in Pan American. It was when people could really buy personal items, and people at that time really saved a lot of stuff. So I have a few postcards I can pass around. Most of them are from 1901, some are like 1904, 1908. And one of them is from the day before McKinley gave his President's Day speech, which I really liked. And I also bought a spoon, because spoons were really popular, and this one is shaped like a pan. So I'll pass that around too. I mean, it's metal, so it's not really, it's also 100 years old. well, this is a map of the grounds. It's an artistic rendering. There are a lot of these, both during the day and at night. The Pan American was built on rented land because it was cheaper to rent than to buy, and so it was built on a farm. This was just flat land before they started. It took about a year and 8 months to build, and then it was completely demolished after because part of the agreement was that they'd return the farm to the way it was. Okay, this is the Temple of Music. This is where on September 6th, William McKinley was shot while he was shaking hands. Professor Roche made fun of me for knowing this, but he was shot at 4:07 in the afternoon. He just started shaking hands at 4 o'clock, so Leon Czolgosz got there real early to kill William McKinley. He'd actually tried to kill him thought about killing him the day before, but couldn't get close enough to him on President's Day, so he waited until he could shake his hand and shoot him while he was shaking his hand. But during the first four and a half months before McKinley was shot, they had daily organ concerts here. John Philip Sousa performed several times. He wrote the Invincible Eagle March just for the Pan American. And they sponsored concerts from all the participants, like Mexico and I know Brazil, and a lot of Latin American countries sponsored concerts here. Okay. They also had season tickets, which turned out to be one of the reasons why the Exposition was a major financial failure. Forgot to mention that. Didn't make any money. It cost about $6 million to build, and it probably lost about $2 million total. So it was a pretty big financial failure. But the Pan American Exposition Company was actually sued a bunch of times during the construction process because they didn't pay the contractors until after the fair was done. And sort of partway through, the contractors realized that they weren't going to make any money out of this, so they wanted to get paid for their work. But they gave away a lot of complimentary tickets and season passes, which had pictures on them, so nobody could transfer the season passes. But offering so many free admissions really hurt them financially. Okay, so this is the New York State building. It's actually the only building that stayed from the Pan American Exposition. They made a deal with the man they leased to the farm from that this is where the New York State display was during the fair, and it's now the Buffalo and Erie County Historical Society, where they keep a research library of all souvenirs and planning documents from the fair. It also holds the piano that they rented for the Temple of Music, because they also rented the piano because they couldn't afford to buy it. This is an architect's model of the electric tower. The idea of having sort of a focal point for fairs started in 1889 with the Exposition Universelle in Paris, which the Eiffel Tower was created for. And so ever since then, every fair one book I read said that every fair needed to out-Eiffel Eiffel. And so the 1893 Chicago Exposition had a Ferris wheel, which was the first Ferris wheel, and the Pan American had the electric tower, which is about 350 feet high total. And this is a view from the top deck of the electric tower. That big dome building on the right is the Temple of Music, and the one on the left is the Ethnology building, which showed a lot of the international anthropological displays. This was taken from 240 feet up, and it cost 15 cents to ride the elevator to get to that height. You could ride an elevator for free up to 75 feet, or climb all the stairs for free. But people are really excited by elevators still, so they like taking the elevator. This was Pabst on the Midway. Pabst was a huge sponsor of the fair. They had the biggest restaurant on the grounds. You could get full meals, you could get snacks, you could get cocktails, and you could get PBR. It cost 20 cents a bottle in 1901, and it was pretty fancy back then, so people were really excited about PBR in 1901. Oh, and another way they lost money at the fair, sorry, side note. you weren't allowed to leave the fair and come back in the same day without paying admission again. So a lot of people smuggled their lunches in because they thought it was too expensive to buy. There were a lot of restaurants, but they thought it was too expensive to buy lunch there, so they smuggled the lunches in purses or camera bags or things like that. Okay, one of my favorite exhibits, I didn't get to talk about it because it really didn't fit in, but it was Bostock's Wild Animals, and this man, Frank Bostock, paid for his own exhibit construction. It was really popular. There was an ostrich farm in there. It was really big. He had an ostrich farm. He had an elephant, which had, I guess it's a sad story, but it's also, well, the elephant, it was a really hot summer that year, and the elephant got really unruly towards the end and attacked a couple people, and so they decided they were going to have to put this elephant down. And so Frank Bostock wanted to sell tickets to a public execution, and there was like oh shoot, I forgot the word. Big field where they played sports. Stadium, sorry. There's a stadium on the fairgrounds, and so he was going to stage an execution of this elephant in the stadium and sell tickets for people to see. He wanted to hang it, but the fair organizer said that wasn't in keeping with the message of the fair. But they were totally okay with electrocution because electricity was like the big thing. Electricity was the focal point of this fair. So they said, go right ahead and execute this elephant by electricity. And so he tried that, but the funny thing is, Tesla had just, one of the features of the fair is Tesla debuting alternating current electricity, which is really new at the time. And it turns out that that was too safe to get through elephant hide, so the elephant did not die, and they pardoned it. So I don't know what happened to the elephant after, but he survived this execution. And just also, not really a funny side note, but McKinley's assassin was the first person executed in New York State by an electric chair. So that's also interesting. So another feature at Bostock's Wild Animal exhibit was a daily human-kangaroo boxing match. I really couldn't fit this in, but I just thought they would put boxing gloves on this kangaroo and just fight it every day. And no one ever really wrote if the kangaroo won. But it's really interesting to me what people found entertaining in 1901, because fighting a kangaroo, I don't know. So this is the electric tower at night. Every night at 8:30 there would be about 8-minute display while the lights warmed up, and every building was illuminated on the outside. Another funny story that I didn't really get to include. The Exposition hospital on the grounds where McKinley was taken when he was shot didn't have electric lighting on the inside. So when they were doing his operation to get the 2 bullets out, one of the doctor's jobs was to hold a mirror up to the window so they could reflect light onto the operating table. So that could be one of the reasons why they never found one of the bullets. And also the surgeon was an OBGYN, so there were a lot of things wrong with that operation. But just in conclusion, this was an enormous event. It was 6 months. It was about 350 acres. There were hundreds of buildings, pavilions, stands they had everything in this one spot. And there were so many stories being told at once that I couldn't tell them all. So I just had to pick really, really carefully. Thank you. Delaware Park now.
All right.
And the only thing was is the New York State building, and there's a boulder on the spot where the Temple of Music was, where McKinley was shot, but it's the median of a highway now.
If you were to go to one part of the Pan Exposition, which one would you go to?
Oh, I don't know, it's really hard.
I mean, the kangaroo boxing is pretty
I know, kangaroo boxing. But the electric tower had restaurants, and it had actually 3 restaurants in different levels, and there's some quote like the view was as high as the prices, or something. Like the higher you got in the tower, the more expensive the restaurants got. But I think I don't know. Oh, it's really hard. I might want to go to the top of the electric tower, because then you can see the whole fair all around. Yeah.
How did you find these?
Oh, I got them at a paper show, like selling old books and postcards and.
Did you just stumble across them, or did you go searching?
No, I just went, and they were in the Buffalo section of postcards. Yeah.
Did you read the book City of White at all?
Oh, the novel?
Yeah, the
I
novel.
got about halfway through,
Right.
and then I realized there were more important things to read, Bryce, but I'm planning to finish it. Well, it's a historical fiction novel about a teacher who lives and teaches in Buffalo during the Exposition, and she had a love child with Grover Cleveland, and I got to that part, and I was like, I'm reading some primary sources, but I think I'll finish it after.
A good world.
Yeah.
How did you come across this whole thing? Why?
That's a good question. Everyone asks how I decided on the topic, but I really don't remember that. It just happened one day because I applied for Copeland funding in last April, for a topic about Tudor English coronation ceremonies. And I didn't get nearly enough Copeland funding to go to England, so I was like, oh, change my topic. And there's actually a musical about presidential assassins. It's super catchy. It's called Assassins, and it's narrated by John Wilkes Booth, and he just travels through history and meets all these presidential assassins. So, the songs are so catchy. If we have time, there's one about William McKinley, and if there's time after Leanne's presentation, and I'll play it for you because it's such a fun toe tapper, but it really is. But that's how I learned about the Pan American for the first time, and it's also really factually accurate. So.